An overview of the Every Student Succeeds Act, ensuring educational stability for children in foster care. Today's presenters are Susan Walkup from the Iowa Department of Education
and Doug Wolf with the Iowa Department of Human Services.
Today's agenda will allow us to summarize education and foster care laws, look at the foster care definition, define interagency collaboration, discuss best interest decision and appropriate enrollment, transportation requirements, and provide resources. The first section will provide a legislative overview of Fostering Connections and the Every Student Succeeds Act.
The obligations for child welfare to ensure education stability for children in foster care that you see and read about in the Every Student Succeeds Act are not new. Fostering Connections to Success and Increasing Adoptions Act of 2008 had a section that dealt specifically with the educational stability of students in foster care. Iowa Department of Human Services, with the courts and with the Department of Education, started the Education Collaborative in 2008 to address fostering connections. We received a lot of support from the American Bar Association and others. American Bar Association has a legal center for foster care and education and was a huge support in giving us perspective on what other states were doing and on the federal policy. The Fostering Connections Act provided assurances that the foster care placement takes into account the appropriateness of the current educational setting and the proximity of that foster care setting to the school of origin. The school of origin is the school where the child has most recently been attending. The law required that the state agency coordinate with the local education agency and the local child welfare, engage the local child welfare education agencies. This is all to ensure that a child in foster care remain in his or her school of origin unless it is not in the child's best interest to remain in that school setting. If remaining in the school of origin was not in the child's best interest, the law said that the child is to be immediately enrolled in a new school setting and records are to be transferred to the new school. The law said that lack of transportation cannot be a barrier to that child remaining in the school of origin.
The Every Student Succeeds Act of 2015 was a reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965. Most recently, the reauthorization was called No Child Left Behind. ESSA requires states to report on achievement and graduation rates for children in foster care and provides new foster care provisions that complement the requirements in the Fostering Connections Act. It emphasizes a shared agency responsibility and shared decision-making. Section 2, Foster Care Programs.
These laws are all about the education stability of children in foster care. The Iowa Department of Human Services, with all of our local offices, has a mission to help Iowans achieve healthy, safe, stable, and self-sufficient lives through the programs and services we provide. That's either directly or through contracted services. We work to ensure that children remain safely at home or as close to home as possible. We want to ensure that children remain in their home school as well, unless it is not in their best interest to do so. The Department of Human Services has the legal authority and oversight responsibilities for children and youth who are determined to be in need of protection, including those who need to enter the foster care system. The Iowa Department of Human Services has 5 DHS service areas. These are regional DHS areas with assigned case managers for every individual in foster care. There are also social work administrators and service area managers in each of the DHS regions. As mentioned, ESSA requires collaboration between child welfare and educators. So let's talk a little bit more about what is foster care. Foster care is 24-hour substitute care. It's placement of a child away from their parents or guardians for safety or other reasons. The Department of Human Services has responsibility for placement and care decisions. What foster care is not when a child is living with a non-custodial parent or other family member when DHS is not involved. There may be some circumstances when there's a DHS case open because of protective or other reasons, but the child has not been placed into foster care. Foster care is not when a child is placed in a state institution. Foster care is not when a child is in a private boarding school or boot camp. Foster care can be voluntary, meaning that there's a signed agreement between DHS and the parents of a child. Foster care can be court ordered. So this is a scenario where the court has decided the child needs to be placed out of home, and the court determines a certain level of care. So the court would say the child should be placed in a foster group care environment, or supervised apartment living, or in a family foster home. DHS then would decide the actual placement, the service provider who would serve that child in foster group care, for example, or in a shelter like Black Hawk County Shelter, for example. DHS can place the child with a friend of a family, school teacher, or a coach as some examples. We call these suitable other placements. This provides an opportunity for DHS to allow a child to live with somebody that they know already. We prioritize placements with safe family members, and then those who are known to the family, and it can be of support to the child or other considerations. I want to provide the federal definition of foster care real quick. That's what we rely on to define the scope of this work. Federal definition of foster care is 24-hour substitute care for children placed away from their parents or guardians and for whom the child welfare agency has placement and care responsibility. That's by the court or through this voluntary placement agreement I discussed. This includes, but is not limited to, placements in foster family homes, foster homes of relatives, group homes, emergency shelters, residential facilities, child care institutions, and pre-adoptive homes. This is complicated. The definition of foster care is complicated and can be confusing. So I would instruct you that if you don't know if a child is in foster care, you simply call the DHS office and ask to speak to the case manager of that child. They will know.
Section 3, Sharing Information and the Memorandum of Understanding. The Title I foster care provisions emphasize the importance of collaboration between child welfare and educational agencies to ensure educational stability and improved outcomes for children in foster care. The MOU has been sent to every district. They are expected to sign it. It becomes effective immediately. The MOU outlines expectations of districts and DHS offices in regards to educational stability of students in foster care. So what can schools share? Schools are very familiar with the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. They know that there are rules about sharing information, who they can share with, making sure that a release is signed before any information is shared. And FERPA also allows for records transfer between schools, which does not require a release. This is between schools only. In 2013, FERPA was amended with the Uninterrupted Scholars Act. The Interrupted Scholars Act amended FERPA to allow sharing with the Department of Human Services case manager in charge of the case plan. No release is required for this sharing. Iowa also has a similar law in Iowa Code Section 280.29, and it lays out the requirements for enrolling children who are in foster care. It requires districts to share educational information with the Department of Human Services and Juvenile Court Services. It requires districts to enroll students immediately with or without paperwork, to enroll students in appropriate courses and programs, and to ensure that records are transferred within 5 days. The Memorandum of Understanding lays out the exchange of confidential information to increase collaborative case planning and ensuring that appropriate school services are provided. Basic information is shared. What this means is that DHS will share enough information for decision-making purposes. It is not a time to share about the family or share stories. It is a time to get enough information to all parties to make appropriate decisions in regard to a student in foster care's education. Section 4, point of contact. The Title I foster care provisions emphasize the importance of collaboration between child welfare and educational agencies to ensure educational stability and improved outcomes for children in foster care. Point of contact, or POC, is required at the state and local level for education. Each state agency is required to identify a point of contact. Each local school district must identify a point of contact for the district. The point of contact name and contact information were submitted to the Department of Education, and you can find that list on the Iowa Department of Ed website under Foster Care Education. The state and local levels have specific duties. ESSA requires an education POC at the state level. Some possible duties would include, but are not limited to, coordinating with the State Department of Human Services, facilitating data sharing, monitoring LEAs, developing and coordinating procedures, developing processes for making best interest determinations, and providing technical assistance. Local education agency POCs would have responsibilities that could include coordinating with the local child welfare agencies to make sure that the ESSA requirements are being implemented, to share information that is ongoing and two-way, to document best interest decisions, to ensure that children are promptly enrolled and transported to their school of origin, to follow any dispute resolution procedures if issues arise, and inform parents, decision makers, and community stakeholders about children's rights.
Although federal law does not require child welfare agencies to have points of contact to coordinate with the education agencies, the Department of Human Services has designated an equivalent POC at the state level and has identified regional POCs at the DHS regional levels. Both Title IV-E and Title I require coordination between the agencies because a designated point of contact in each agency would likely help to facilitate successful, sustainable collaboration. It's going to keep children close to home whenever possible, keep them in their home school when that's the most appropriate setting for them, and this will achieve better education outcomes for our children who have to enter foster care. The notification that was sent to superintendents in December of 2016 is considered the notification from DHS of who their POCs for each school district will be. At the state level, we're going to review the list of POCs annually, and we're going to make sure that there's a statewide coverage of points of contact in education and in child welfare. And we ask that at the regional and district levels that you ensure that you maintain a point of contact at all times. So if there's a change of staff or something of that nature, please reassign a point of contact immediately. The point of contact at DHS is a decision maker, a problem solver, and a system level coordinator. The point of contact, the regional point of contact for DHS, is not the case level worker. As I said, the point of contact will be more the problem solver for child welfare. The DHS case manager, on the other hand, will handle many of the roles described for the local POC on the district side. They're going to do the notification that a child is in foster care. The case manager will determine the best interest with the local education agencies and others. We'll be ensuring appropriate enrollment, and we'll be working with the LEAs on transportation arrangements. Again, I can't stress enough that it's the DHS case manager for the child who's entering or in foster care who will be handling all of the case level duties and will frequently be working with the local district POCs. So more on the DHS POC duties. The state level POC, that's myself. My contact information is at the end of this PowerPoint. We'll be trying to provide guidance to the local areas. We'll be working with the state level Department of Education in improving communication, addressing policies, addressing manuals and things that are going to be necessary for you at the local level to do your best work. And we'll be responding to questions that you have to improve your efficiency and improve your support of the youth and students in foster care that you're trying to serve. At the regional level, we use a community liaison titled person for our points of contact. So there'll be at least one per DHS service area, and they're local problem solvers. They're working with you on the at education on establishing the local processes. What they're not going to do is answer case level questions. That is the responsibility, again, of the case manager. The case manager for a child in foster care will be communicating with the POCs and will be providing notifications and addressing other case level interactions.
Again, the list of point of contact is located on the Iowa Department of Education website under foster care education. The LEA POCs are district-based. The DHS POCs are regional. The case manager for the child is always the first point of contact for the school POC. The school POC is always the first point of contact for the DHS case manager. Section 5, Best Interest Decisions. Best interest decisions are to be completed collaboratively so that the best interest of the child on whether to remain in the school of origin is achievable.
These best interest determinations, they're required by both Fostering Connections and ESSA. Fostering Connections and ESSA required that Department of Human Services and local districts work together to make a best interest decision. Okay, this means that for the child who's in foster care, entering foster care, that decisions are made so that they remain enrolled in the school of origin that's the school they've been attending, unless there's a determination that it is not in the best interest of the child to continue to attend that school of origin. So collaborative decisions are made based on all the information presented by the child welfare agency and the school district. This is an opportunity to engage family members and others who have information necessary to make such decisions. We like to say that for this policy and the practices incumbent upon all of us, that we need to prove to move. So the child stays in the home school, the school they've been attending, unless we can prove that there's a good reason, it's in the best interest of the child that they move to another school setting. I'm going to give you some examples of some of the considerations that you'll make. So when the LEA and the child welfare case manager are talking, they're going to be thinking about the preferences of the child. What school does this child want to attend? Is everything working for them at the current school? What does the parent think about that? What are the education decision makers at the school of origin saying? What is the child's attachment to the school they've been attending? What is the availability of quality services at the school? What about the length of commute? If a child is placed in foster care some distance away from the school of origin, how will the length of the commute to school and back to the caretaker at the end of each day affect that child? And the considerations about the development of the child and other things are going to come into play here. For example, if the child is a student with a disability under IDEA, there may be things to consider, and the team around the child for those disabilities would be important to consult. These are not all of the considerations, but I think this will give you an example of some of the things that you'll be thinking about and talking about with your partners.
Section 6, Transportation. A separate webinar for transportation will be created soon. Please note the MOU did outline requirements for the transportation of students in foster care. Each LEA receiving Title I funds must collaborate with their state or local Department of Human Services to ensure that transportation for children in foster care is provided, arranged, and funded when necessary to remain in their school of origin. There are 6 scenarios listed in the MOU for different types of transportation. Within the district, with a district that is contiguous, with a non-contiguous district, transportation is not always required. When additional costs are necessary for transporting students in foster care, the district is responsible for documenting the additional costs involved in transporting these students. The following 2 slides will provide resources from the Iowa Department of Ed website, the non-regulatory guidance that came from the United States Department of Ed and the United States Health and Human Services, and the ESSA State Implementation Toolkit put out by the American Bar Association. And then meeting the educational needs of students in child welfare, tips for teachers, and tips for administrators and school counselors, and the Neglected and Delinquent Technical Assistance Center is also a very good resource for serving students in the child welfare system. The last slide provides the contact information for Susan Walkup at the Department of Ed and Doug Wolf at the Department of Human Services. Please let us know if you have questions or concerns or may need further assistance. Thank you for your participation.